Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes? Matt here from YoVideogames with another review for the channel, this time of the last big Sony PS4 first-party title, Ghost of Tsushima. Now, a lot of people have been enjoying this game over the last month or so, and with good reason, as, you know, it is an amazing swan song for the system. This comes from Sucker Punch Productions, which is a company I've never really followed. I know who they are, but outside of playing demos and E3 builds of Sly Cooper, I haven't really touched upon their product much, and I never really ever played an Infamous game, so this was the first title of theirs that actually garnered my interest, and a lot of that has to do with sort of the setting of the game, which is of the Mongolian invasion of Japan in 1274. Now, is this a historical simulator? Of course not really, but it does have a lot of fun little things strewn about the game, which do help to enhance the overall mood and setting and environment. And speaking of which, let's just get right into it. Let's talk about what is the most standout feature of this game, and that, of course, is the graphics. This is a looker of a game. It is beautiful. It is meant to be beautiful. It is meant to evoke many strong, both emotions and just pushing the system to sort of its limits. However, I will say this, it is an open world game. It is something that is not going to be as tightly focused as, say, Last of Us 2, which I think on a technical level would have higher graphical fidelity, but this game kind of like tries to push a little bit back against the hyper-realism of some of the other big first-party titles, namely like Spider-Man and whatnot have you, and tries to have a little bit of its own little art style. Now, I say that a little bit, not a lot. This is a game where obviously it has sweeping vistas and coastal plains and mountains and everything, and it all looks very, very, very beautiful, probably more beautiful than you would get in such a small area in real life. But it's also not a game that's trying to be stylized either. The character models are very realistic. There's a lot of very meticulous mocap work done and facial capture done so that the actors look like the characters they're playing in the game. So you're not going to get a game that looks anything close to stylized or artsy or animated, say Breath of the Wild, if you will. This is going for that Sony realism look that you see in God of War and Spider-Man and Last of Us, although probably less stylized than God of War. God of War is very realistic looking, but it's still distinct that, hey, this is still Kratos, what have you. But it's kind of more in that area, I'd say. But it succeeds more on a technical, less on a technical front, more on an artistic front. And I think the best way to describe it is like, you can look at a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, which definitely looks better technically. There's more going on. There's more detail. There's more, intricate nitty-gritty details in every little inch of that world. But this game has that sort of romanticized view, and that's probably something that kind of carries through everything, and that is, it's a romanticized view of Tsushima, of the era, of samurais, of everything, and that kind of carries over into sort of the artistic game and environment as well, where you're getting this sort of postcard view of Japan that's probably, obviously, a little, stretched on reality, but regardless, it works because we're playing a video game here. We're not actually going on a virtual tour of the island of Tsushima, which is actually very close to South Korea, kind of sits right in between. At some points, it's actually kind of closer to South Korea than Japan. And it was the first stop in the Mongols' invasion tour of 1274 and 1281. So what you're getting here is an island that, while in real life probably has one or two types of biodiversity, in this game it kind of runs the gamut of all of Japan. So like the southern parts of Tsushima Island are very woodsy, a lot of lush greens, you get a lot of like coastal stuff, and then when you get to the very northern tip, it's all this very snowy mountains and plains and stuff, and it's like, okay, like this is something that Sucker Punch has acknowledged, saying like, hey, we had to we stretched the definition of the ecosystems within Tsushima. It's got a lot of different ones, and I agree with this decision personally. Like, I know it's not realistic, but I think it works much better in the game's favor because you are playing a video game and you don't want your video game to have just one environment type. So in the service of making a better, more varied game, this game goes for it. And I actually kind of applaud that in general speaking, where there were a lot of times where you'll see throughout the game where there were decisions where we could have made something more realistic. We could have made something a little bit more, but that would have made it more mundane. And a big example of this would be just collecting objects in the world. Now, say in Red Dead Redemption 2, you have to go up to a shelf, you have to hold down a button, and Arthur will reach out and pick up an item and look at it, and then you press, put it in his knapsack or whatever. Everything's automatic here. Like, you go into a tent in this game, and there's objects to pick up. You just mash the R2 button, and they just automatically go into your inventory. There's no pickup animations for shit, so it's even less than, say, Last of Us, where like you'll see Joel and Ellie just sort of like reaching out and sort of like hover handing stuff. This thing is just completely automatic, and again, I think that works in the game's favor because a big portion of this game is stealth, and when you're being stealthy, you don't want to sit there and like be stuck in animation when you're just quickly trying to grab a small object off a shelf. So I think one of the greatest strengths of this game is that it does sort of eschew more realistic things in favor of being a quicker, better, faster paced game. That goes for graphics, that goes for gameplay as well. And I'm very biased in this regard, where I've always been drawn towards very pretty looking environments. I want games to take place in areas that I would love to be in, that I would want to go, that I would want to visit. I don't want to play a video game where I'm stuck in a cave, or I'm stuck in a volcano, or I'm stuck in a factory. I'm beyond sick to death of warehouses and shipping crates. So none of that bullshit in this game, of course, because it's $12.74, and obviously there's no shipping containers to be had. But yeah, the game is all about just, we want to have really pretty environments. It's this very like the best of all of Japan, ancient Japan, as far as the sweeping fields of flowers and tall grass, and even when stuff isn't meant to be pretty, it's still got like a distinct look and style to it. Even when you're running through swamps or snow, like it still has a very high visual fidelity. They did a lot of effects works on the wind especially, and they did a really cool thing where instead of having a big arrow or a visual indicator of which direction to head, the wind just sort of blows in that direction. You just kind of like follow the trail of the wind, which I like a lot. I think it works really well. Also helps to show off the environment without distracting you too much. So I really like that aspect of it. Everything about this, I can't say enough good things about the environment and graphics of this game. They did a really good job. I think the other important thing is the environment worth exploring? And I kind of think it is, because they tend to hide upgrades and little things that you get to boost both of your ability to carry more stuff, or your little gameplay stat increases, which are done through charms. They're done by climbing up these crazy vistas that you go through, these sort of like environmental puzzle climbing aspects, and then at the end you're greeted with this sweeping vista of whatever area you're in. And I actually really dig that. So it sort of combines the idea that, hey, we worked really hard on this environment and these graphics, and we're going to reward you with a gameplay hook at the end. You're going to get a charm that's going to like drastically increase your health, or it'll drastically lower your sound you emit while sneaking through stuff. So it does all kinds of stuff like that. So you're incentivized to explore, and it's not just, hey, go find this tiny little cave or nook hidden under this bush. It's like, we want you to climb up this thing, and it's not just for like getting an Ubisoft tower where like we unlock the map of your area. The map of the game is just automatically unlocked always. It's hey, we're gonna give you this cool little gameplay treat, and then you're gonna get this really cool treat by just seeing this really cool vista. And they have a photo mode, which is very, very in-depth. Some games recently have had a lot of in-depth photo modes, and this game is definitely part of that branding or collage of titles, where it's like, look, we know we worked really hard on making this look as beautiful as we could. We wanted to include a billion different options in the photo mode. So at any point you can press right on the D-pad and you can take a photo, and you can do all kinds of things to it. You can tweak the color, you can tweak, effects. You can have like rain falling or leaves falling or blowing or whatever. You can do all kinds, change the time of day at whim. You could change the weather effects. Like you could add little timestamps, you could like put little titles on your photos. It does everything it can to really like have the most enhanced photo mode ever. And I usually don't give a shit about this stuff. And this is the first time I played a video game where I'm like, I like the photo. I'm like, I'll actually stop and take photos because, my God, they worked really hard on making this one of the best looking games ever. Even if it's not from a technical standpoint, it's very close. Like, it is just right behind, on a technical level, just right behind something like Red Dead 2 and Last of Us 2. But I think it succeeds past both of those games because it goes for a slightly more romanticized view instead of a highly realistic view. And what you get is just a game that is more beautiful, even though it's just shy technically of having the same amount of insane detail. So all that being said, yes, I think this game is a looker. Now, you can't buy a game just because its graphics are good. I mean, it certainly helps for me in this case. But you know, at the end of the day, what it's really all about is the game fun to play? And then the nice thing to say is, of course, yes. So Ghost of Tsushima is basically based on two things: combat and sneaking. And I'm going to be brutally honest with you here. They're adequate. They're just good enough. I would say the combat's a little stronger than the stealth. The stealth is exactly what I want for the most part, where it's like it's never. Okay, it's not never. It is sometimes forced upon you. It is rarely is stealth ever forced upon you. The crux of Ghost of Tsushima is basically about going around killing Mongols. That's basically it. That's all you do. You go, whether you encounter them on the road, just as a small group, or you go into their encampments. The crux of the game, and basically what every single mission involves, is going to an area and wiping out all of the Mongol invaders in a given area. And for almost, I would say 90% of the game, you're given the option to either stealth assassinate them or just face them in direct combat. And I really like that. I really appreciate the fact that it's not skewing one way or the other, because the game is very much, all the skills in your skill tree in the game is based around this duology of, we have almost just as many stealth mechanics as combat mechanics. I think it's a pretty fair split. It's about 50-50. If it's not, it feels 50-50, and that's the important part, is that it really feels like they thought about, okay, we are focusing highly on this or that. And I'll get to the slight detriment of that, but for the stealth aspect alone, it's pretty good, but it's very, very basic. The AI is a little dumb. You will be able to, say, shoot someone in the head with an arrow while hidden, and the guy who's very close to him, easily within viewpoint, won't notice that his buddy just dropped dead. Sometimes but the game does have AI things built in where if another guard notices a dead body, he'll run over to it, he'll look at it, and then he'll call others over. But you're gonna see that their field of vision and their cone of hearing, if you will, it's pretty generous. You're able to get away with a lot in this game. If you're one of those European extreme difficulty players for Metal Gear Solid, you're probably going to be disappointed with how easy it is to stealth assassinate your way through this game. But on the other hand, if you're someone like me who really doesn't enjoy stealth that much, the 10% of the time where the game does force you to play stealth missions, you'll appreciate the fact that it's very goddamn lenient, at least on normal. But even from what I've seen and experienced on hard, it's really not all that much. Now, they added another difficulty in a patch post-release, and I have not played on that, so I can't really say if that changed anything on the stealth mechanic part of it. But I do know that the way the game was designed and meant to be played, it's pretty generous on stealth, which I like. And every so often I do like mixing it up. Sometimes it's just easier to just kind of fun even, because again, this game goes for more arcadey style stuff, which is interesting because Sucker Punch started their whole thing by being sort of a stealthy platformer mixed with Sly Cooper, and you can kind of see a little bit of that here. There's some tightrope walking that you'll get. So yeah, it's a game where I did mix up the stealth and the combat sometimes, but then there were other times where like you just want to kill everything. You don't want to beat around the bush. You don't want to sneak around. You just want to walk in, and you can just walk right into the middle of any encampment and just be like, you know what? Let's go. In fact, there's a neat mechanic where you'll see it on the roads, and sometimes when you're approaching an enemy camp, you'll get a button prompt called standoff if you press up on the D-pad. And what it does is it sends out the first wave of whatever enemies are in a given area, and you get this sort of basically dual mechanic gets set up where you have to hold down the triangle button and then you have to release it right before the enemy hits you. And it plays about exactly like the Kirby duel game from Kirby Superstar and Kirby's Adventure. I know it's kind of a weird pull, but if you've played either of those games before, you'll be like, oh yeah, it plays exactly like that. So you basically have that, and then you get the ability to sort of upgrade it where you can chop up to like 3 or 4 enemies in one standoff before you initiate actual game combat. It's fun. And there are definitely times where you will feel like, I want to stealth through this. I don't want to have any possible like, trouble getting through this area. I want to kind of do things as quietly as possible. And then sometimes you're just like, I just want to kill everything, and the game just lets you do that. The combat, though, now getting into the combat, the one unfortunate thing about this game is because it is a giant open world, beautiful ass PS4 game, it's 30 frames per second, so you are going to feel the limitations of that a little bit. I think the greatest problem, like most annoying thing, and it was although I say greatest, it's very minor, is that the parry mechanic in the game feels very much based on prediction, not parrying, because they tell you, hey, if you hit the block button right before an enemy attacks, you'll parry them and drop their guard. And because it's 30 frames, you're not going to get that tight 60 frames window. And then on top of it, they seem to compensate for this by the parry window seems to be favoring you pressing it way before you normally think you would. Like if you're used to, say, parries in Metal Gear Rising and Bayonetta and other Platinum games, this is not like that. Like the parry window is way different. It's way before you think it's going to be. And even though they sometimes flash what they're going to do with like a blue light or a red light being unparryable, but you can do you can do a dodge parry, which is an upgradable ability. It's still meant to be pressed way before you assume, or I would assume as a Platinum Games aficionado, you're meant to press that dodge button way earlier than you would in a normal character action game. And this can lead to some frustrating moments. Certainly did for me, but the way the game's handled with its gameplay structure, it's not too bad because you can kind of just gotta like mentally prepare yourself. Like you gotta press that parry way before you think you do. And characters have plenty of wind up animation. It's not like characters are not going to be randomly like attacking you and hitting you way before they actually swing their sword. You're not going to have any of those problems. But like once you kind of get used to that mentality, you're going to find the combat's fun. It's very fluid. It's very arcadey. You get there's on multiple stances, so you have enemies with different weapon types, and each weapon type is countered by having a stance type. And the only other slight frustrating thing is that switching between ranged weapons and throwing, because there's ranged, throwing, and then of course your sword stances, and trying to finagle through all of those different things while in combat can get a little bit not confusing, but a little bit frustrating, because it's a bit like pat your head and rub your tummy kind of thing, where sticky bombs are a throwing item, but a grenade is a ranged weapon, so that's a different thing, because one thing you have to hold down L2 and R2, and one team you just hold down R2. It gets trying to vary up your it's more of a problem for throwing items and ranged weapon changing. For weapon stance, it's pretty easy. All you do is hold down R2 and then press one of the face buttons to change your stance. You have a stance for swords, you have a stance for hammers, you have a stance for spears, you have a stance for shields, and they work exactly as they're intended. There's not any real problem there. You don't feel cheated where it's like, oh, you're fighting if you're in the wrong stance and you're fighting a guy with a shield and he constantly like blocks or doesn't take damage, you don't feel like, oh, well, I need to switch to the water stance. Water stance will break shield people all the time. There's no real confusion on that. Just it works as intended, which is good. You don't want a game that feels like your inputs are being misread or whatever. And that's the other thing. It never feels like your inputs are misread or not being read, but you will get that sort of like, oh, it is 30 frames, and depending on which system you're playing on, you might have like drops in really heavy areas. So again, it's not like the most smoothest experience that you're going to get on, say, like a PC version at 60 frames. But it's really not bad, and there's a lot of things you can do in combat that's kind of fun to do. Like you get a slow mo when you're using the bow. That's an ability you can unlock, and you can use that for some fun shenanigans. It's also fun to mix up throwing items with your combat. So if, say, like you knock someone down, and then you can throw a kunai or a sticky bomb on them. You can do a lot of little fun stuff like that. The only thing I will say about combat that it's not a problem to me, but it is something you do notice when you get close to the end game. When you get to about the last third of the game, and if you've been properly using your skill points you get from experience, because there's an experience system. It's a very basic, rudimentary one. If you use them properly, when you get to the end of the game, you're going to be very hard to kill, and you're going to have a lot of things. And like just upgrading the grenades alone, you can throw a black powder bomb into a group of 6 to 8 people, and they will all die if it's fully upgraded. You can negate a lot of big crowd problems really easily if once you start getting more and more powered up. It's actually more difficult at the beginning because you have less abilities to heal. Your life bar is really short, so it's kind of one of those weird things where like it's almost more difficult at the start. They try to do their best to say, like, okay, from the early parts of the game, you're not going to fight as many enemies as huge of crowds. And they try to, obviously they ramp it up as you get further into the game, they make more and more enemies appear, and enemies have better armor and more health. But you upgrade yourself pretty heavily, and you're gonna be a combat god by the end of this game. And you're going to be wrecking shop really hard, and you feel good about it too. That's the important thing, is that regardless of the fact that you feel very empowered by the end of it, it also feels very good, because again, this game leans more towards arcadey than sim-like. Like, yes, it is a specific point in time in history, but it feels a lot of the design philosophy for the combat and for just the general gameplay is done with an arcadey mindset, and I appreciate that immensely, because it makes jumping into the game just feel really good, even if you've been away for a few days. And part of that's helped by the fact that if you do fast travel, it's one of the fastest fast travels I've ever seen on a giant open world game. It's unbelievable how much they're able to load you from one end of Tsushima to the other, how quickly they're able to do that. And it's not some locked mechanic at all. Like, it's just automatic. It's always there. As long as once you've gone to an area, you can fast travel to it, as long as it's like a landmarked location. Like, there's no Red Dead 2 horseshit here. It's just, they know, and it's so weird too, because it's a game that's about how beautiful the environments look, but hey, if you just want to fast travel really quickly ping around the island, we just let you do that, and they've optimized the hell out of this system. Like, I can't believe how fast it loads stuff. Like, it puts even games like Spider-Man 2 to shame with how fast it loads whole sections of the island. It's pretty incredible. And then, moving in from that, we talked about graphics and presentation and gameplay, and the soundtrack is kind of one of the last big things there. And it's hard for me to say this, because I think the harshest thing I can say is that the game doesn't feel like it has much of a musical identity. And what I mean by that is, like, if you were to hear the music in the game, you wouldn't think, oh, it's those fields, or it's that forest, or it's that snowy area, or anything. Because again, it does the open world thing, or it doesn't really have a lot of music going. Now, when you do specific boss fights, and when you have cutscenes going, it has a soundtrack playing, and it's really beautiful. That's the thing, is I don't want to say this game has bad music. It doesn't. It has great music. It just doesn't have enough. That's really, at the end of the day, that's kind of what I would get at, is that people, you have characters that have their own theme, and you can even play them during photo mode. But the problem really for me is that, like, I really wish that the locations on the island had their own theme to it. It doesn't have location-based themes. It has character themes, and it has cutscene music, music made specifically for these big dramatic moments, and it's beautiful, and it works really well. And then unfortunately though, when you're playing the other 80% of this game, you're not hearing any music at all. So yeah, like, the music's great when it's there, and then for the rest of the game, it's just kind of not. And I think for a lot of people, they're not going to care. For me, it's more of a personal thing where I really miss soundtracks. I really miss environment and location-based title tracks, and this game doesn't have it, and I really wish it did. It definitely gives the game somewhat of a more Western feel to it, where like you feel the okay, this is very much a Western style game where there's no music here, and I know Zelda's like that too, and I've aired my grievances about Breath of the Wild soundtrack many a time, but I would say that unlike Breath of the Wild, like this game, the soundtrack almost anytime the soundtrack plays in this game, it's always great. Where Breath of the Wild, I would say like a lot of the music tracks that are in the game aren't even that good. Hello, enemy, hello, Moblin theme, hello, ancient Guardian themes. Like they're not that great. The music here, when it does play, great. When unfortunately it doesn't play nearly as often as I wish it did. So that being said, it has one of the greatest title drops in gaming history. Like it's almost like such a because people will obviously point to like the title drop of this game, where if you don't know what I'm talking about, like it means when the name of the game appears on screen. It's so fucking cool and amazing and one of the best in gaming, and I agree 100% on that. And unfortunately, I just wish I wish it had music like that going all throughout the game. I really do. So it almost sets you up for disappointment in a small way, where it's like, oh my god, this game is like just so emotionally like involving and empowering, and then when you get into the game, like you're not gonna hear a lot of music, but what is here is amazing. It just needed more. Now the overall, I thought this game was a delight. This was a delightful, wonderful send off to the PS4, which has been a great system with a great many great games. And I enjoyed almost every single minute of this game. Like I only a few times would I get a little frustrated at a fourth stealth segment, which was very rare. Or sometimes I would be a little frustrated that the parry mechanic was wanting me to hit it way earlier than I did. But overall, it was a delight. The combat was fun. It was fluid. The stealth was just lenient enough for me. Everything, and again, that wow factor, that exploration, it's super good. The only thing I can say is that this is an open world game where you don't do much but kill people. That's kind of it. There's not a lot of variety. Now you can go find these shrines. A lot of the exploring stuff is just kind of like that. You just kind of go somewhere and get something. It's you go to these to honor these special shrines, which are these great climbing areas. You go to find the fox shrines. You go to find a hot spring, but you're not really doing anything. It's more or less you found thing. Press button to activate thing on map. That's kind of it. And even the bamboo cutting mini game, which is pretty awesome, and I like it a lot. It's find a bamboo cutting area and input a game code. It's press these buttons in sequence. That's fucking it. So there's not a lot else to do in the game. And part of it's also kind of a good thing in a way, where it's like you don't have to worry about managing a bunch of different stats for stuff. Like you have one sword, you have one killing dagger, you upgrade them, you upgrade those, and that's it. You have one short range bow, you have one long range bow. That's it. You upgrade those alone. That's it. You don't do anything else. There are a lot of cosmetics you can find, and some of them you can just find in the game world alone. Some of them you get as part of the story. And they're always cool. Like it's always cool to see like, oh, I found this cool scarf, I found this cool scabbard for my sword. You can upgrade, and as you upgrade armor sets, it visually changes, but you can also fashion souls it where like, oh, I want it to look like this even though I want to upgrade it. So that's pretty cool. It allows you to do that. So there's a big play on fashion part of the game, which is always appreciated, and I always love that. But as far as variety of gameplay, not much. Like it's pretty much, you ride around, you do like every side quest, whether they be main story quests or important side quests about like main characters in the game, or just really, really sub side quests. They all boil down to go here, kill this, group of people, kill these group over here. That's it. Like there's nothing else to this game. It is go, chop, kill. And there's a beauty in that simplicity where you never feel overwhelmed. I think that is one positive you can take away, is you never feel like, oh, there's all these 20 different game mechanics that I have to try to remember. There's not. It's whether it's go here, kill this person. Either do it stealthily or do it like brazenly, and that's it. And again, I can appreciate the beauty in that, but it is also a game where it's kind of like, okay, like there's nothing else going on. There's no like, no trading card mini game or playing cards game, or there's no fishing, there's no anything like that. some people say like they enjoy the fact that like, I don't want to do any of that other shit in this game. Like I just want to go around and be cool. Like this is a game where like yeah, you go around and you kill Mongol invaders and that's it. And that's all you really do. And you occasionally might find a shrine to bow at or a hot spring to get naked and take a bath in by doing nothing but pressing a button. So that's kind of it. Like I will say in the future, and I assume there will be a Ghost of Tsushima 2, because there was a second Mongol invasion 7 years after this one in real life. So I'm assuming that we're going to get to a part 2. I think one thing they could add is that maybe, mix up some of the weapon variety. You just get the one sword, and you have the different stances, but that's it. The stances mostly exist to just... You only switch stances, really, so that you can break the guard of different enemy types. But it would be cool in the future to get, maybe a spear, or maybe like size, or maybe, some other weapons. It might be kind of fun in the future, to get, double-handed swords, or maybe get like a sword shield combo, something like that. Maybe in the future... For the next game, we can get like different weapon types. I kind of assume that's where they're gonna go with it, because this game was like, yeah, you just have the one katana that you hold and that's it, and you change your stances. But it might be fun in the future to get something like spears and whatnot, and mix it up a little bit. But for this game, it's very focused on what it is. You never have to worry about anything like again, like you have a horse you can travel with, but you don't have to worry about like brushing your horse or keeping it clean or anything like that, or putting it in a stable. It's just like you get off the horse. Like you can literally go to the top of a cliff, get off your horse, climb down the cliff, get to the bottom of the cliff, press the horse call button, and then the horse just magically pops up behind you. Like it again, all done in the service of gameplay. It's got a very arcadey feel. Like they're not trying to hyper real, make everything hyper realistic, and it's realistic. You can't, if your horse is at the top of the cliff, you can't get to the bottom and just call it and it'll magically appear. No, it's a video game. Like screw the inconveniences of real life. It's a video game, and I appreciate that a lot, and it makes playing this game just so much more fun than it would be if they had gone a more Red Dead route where everything took 5 years to do. Like even skinning animals in this game is you just walk over, and there's only 3 technically. There's only like 2 animal types you can skin, which is just you walk over them, you press the R2 button, you picked up the animal skin, done. End of story. So that being said, I appreciate the fact that this game knows when to be a video game. And it knows when it's more fun to have something very detailed and realistic, or very, very cool looking, but also we also know that, hey, it's a video game, and we got to try to keep the arcadey feel. So I think that's probably the greatest strength of this game, is it knows how to balance, the ease of use and convenience, knowing when to balance convenience versus realism. And that's something a lot of open world games don't get right, or just pad out, or put a lot of boring mechanics in there to just arbitrarily lengthen the game length and stuff. So this game really succeeds in that balance aspect of like, we know when to make things quicker, faster, more arcadey, because it's a video game and we want you to have fun playing it, and we don't want you to feel like you're grinding. So there's no grind in this game. Appreciate that a lot. Yeah, and like I said, there is a rudimentary experience system, but it's very automatic. And it's very easy, simple, well done. Again, it's not a game that you're ever gonna feel like you have to grind. There's no grinding in this game, even though there is an experience system and a skill tree. There's really no grinding. You can just play the main game, and you're gonna unlock most everything you need to unlock just naturally. So I appreciate that a lot. This was a delightful game. On a personal level, I would say this game was about a 9 to close to a 9.5. For me, it's about a 9. I'm gonna go with that. Again, everything was delightful about it. It was a world I wanted to explore, a world I wanted to be in. It was a fun story. It wasn't anything mind-blowing or groundbreaking, but it did everything. It did everything good, if not great. If it wasn't great, it was at least good. And I just had a wonderful time playing it. On a critical level, I'd probably say this game is closer to an 8.0. So if you're new to this channel, this is how I do ratings here. There's personal and critical. Personally, this game was about a 9 because I just found it a joy to play, joy to explore. But critically, I would say it's about an 8. And the reason why I say that is because it is a game that doesn't have much, like it does nothing new, which is fine, but it also doesn't have a ton to do in general. It's a game that's basically about, you have this beautiful open world to basically kill Mongols in, and not a lot else. I think there are some things like it could benefit, from say a PS5 version, maybe bumping the frame rate up to 60 frames. Combat could have a little more going for it. There's not a lot to it. It's light attack, heavy attacks, and you just kind of mash away at either of them. There's not a lot of finesse to the combat. There's not a lot of variety in it either. Again, getting more weapons in a sequel would be something I would see be a way to sort of upgrade it. And again, you have all these crazy cool looking vistas, and you liberate these villages and farmlands and temples and whatever. And there's really nothing to do in a town once you've unlocked it. You can buy shit from the armor or the merchant and it's the same thing across everywhere on the island. Like, a blacksmith in one town is going to give you the same upgrades for the blacksmith in the next town. There's only there's only 4 or 5 upgrades to the one sword you have throughout the whole game. So yeah, critically I would say it's about an 8 because not really a lot of stuff done innovated here, and there's not a lot to do otherwise other than just sort of roam over these beautiful vistas and kill Mongols. That's kind of it. But on a personal level, that's fine with me, which is why, again, I say personally this is a 9. I had a delightful time playing this game. I would play more of it. I will play more of it, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I am going to be looking forward to the second Mongol invasion immensely. But I can also take a step back and critically I can say, there's also not a lot going on here in this game. But at least what it does well, or it does great even. So at the end of the day, do I think this is worth a buy? Absolutely. I think this is a fucking great send-off for the system. I think, I think you've definitely got enough hours of gameplay. You've got enough really cool presentation and story stuff. Like, you can, again, if you're inclined, you can fiddle with the photo mode at least forever to your heart's content, if that's your thing. But this was a fantastic end to the system's run, and I do recommend it. And let me know what you guys think, and I will see you on the channel later, dudes.